Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, my dear brothers and sisters in Christ. And in today, we are going to be discussing something that is been quite popular among the Protestant circles, and this is known as you know, the topic is the council that never existed. So, without further ado, we shall begin with our presentation. So, was there a council that took place in Jamnia? So now some Protestant critics believe that the Old Testament canon was closed in the Council of Jamnia in 90 AD, and at that time the Deuterocanonical books were not included in the Council of Jamnia, and thus, according to some Protestant critics, they say that the Deuterocanonical books are not considered to be inspired nor part of the Old Testament canon. And many Protestant critics believed in the Council of Jamnia. For example, Jimmy Swaggart, who is a Protestant televangelist, he says, at the end of the first century, the Jewish rabbis at the Council of Jamnia closed the canon of the Hebrew book. And Norman Geisler Rob Mackenzie even followed that same rhetoric, that same mantra, repeated that same myth that there was a council that was held in Jamnia. But what is actually the true story behind Jamnia? So we have this famous Jewish sage by the name of Yohanan ben Zakkai. And Yohanan ben Zakkai, what happened was that he foresaw the destruction of Jerusalem. And during that time, there was the first Jewish revolt and the second Jewish revolt that was caused by these fanatic Jews, also known as the Zealots. So these fanatical Jews, the Zealots, they were actually against bowing down to the Roman Empire. So they even are against Jews who kind of supports them, or in a way just appease the Roman Empire. So Yohanan ben Zakkai was not a big fan of this, and what he did was that since he knew that the temple will be destroyed sooner or later because the Roman Empire is going to notice what the Zealots were doing, he felt that there is a need to relocate the center of Torah scholarship. And so what he did was he plotted to leave Jerusalem without being blocked by the Zealots, because these fanatical Jews, they said no one comes in, no one comes out. And so what he did was he faked his death, and his students carried his coffin to meet with the future Roman Emperor Vespasian, who was still a general at that time. And Vespasian actually replied to Yohanan ben Zakkai saying that, I'm not yet an emperor, yet you call me your majesty. Now, news was so he actually received a message from the messenger, because the messenger reported to Vespasian saying that the emperor has died. So Nero died, and Vespasian has now been appointed emperor of Rome. And so Vespasian said, okay, since I'm now the emperor, I will grant you 3 wishes. So one of the 3 wishes of Yohanan ben Zakkai was setting up a school in Yafne, or in Jamnia. So this would become the new home of the Sanhedrin, or what we call the Bet Din. So there was actually no record of a council taking place in Jamnia, and this is in stark contrast to the popular myth. So this myth was actually invented by this German scholar by the name of Heinrich Graetz in 1871. So this was later followed by some Protestant critics, and especially, unfortunately, some Christian circles or even scholars have followed this also as well. But thankfully, not all Christians do believe in it. For example, the Oxford Dictionary of the Christian Church. Now, it says here, the suggestion that a particular synod of Japne held in 100 AD. Actually, it's supposed to be 90 AD, not 180. So this information is inaccurate. Finally, settling the limits of the Old Testament canon was made by H.E. Ryle. Though it has a wide currency, there is no evidence to substantiate it. So they say that there's really no substantial evidence that a council did took place in Jamnia. Now, even the evangelical website, godquestions.org, I think many Catholics would have been familiar with this website that was run by evangelicals. They said here, there is no clear evidence that Jewish leadership held a specific council where the Old Testament canon was settled once and for all. If such a council did happen, there is no way to determine if it was clearly authoritative because official Judaism was in disarray as the temple had been destroyed and the Jews were scattered across the Roman Empire. And what they say is actually correct. There is no like one Judaism out of all, because there are actually different Jewish sects. Like, for example, you have the Zealots, you have the Pharisees, you have the Sadducees, you have the Essenes, the Samaritans. So there were different Jewish sects at that point of time. So there wasn't like a singular body of Judaism. Now, Roger T. Beckwith, who is an Anglican scholar, wrote that what took place in Jamnia was not a council, but rather it was a discussion. But yes, a decision was made. It was made, but it wasn't regarded as authoritative. And that's something that even other scholars like Roger T. Beckwith recognize, that what took place was merely a discussion. It wasn't a council, and the decisions are not regarded as authoritative. So what was discussed in Jamnia? So this biblical scholar F.F. Bruce writes, some disputants also ask whether the wisdom of Jesus, son of Sirah, and the Gileonmin, which is the Aramaic gospel writings, and other books of the Minim, heretics, including Jewish Christians, should be admitted, but there the answer was uncompromisingly negative. So they were merely discussing whether do they defile the hands. Now, defile the hands is actually a rabbinic term to say whether does it show our hands to be unclean. If it does, that means this book is sacred, it's inspired to the point that it reveals our impurities. But if they say that it does not defile the hands, then it means that this book is not holy, it's not sacred, it's not inspired. So if you hear this, defiling of the hands, it's actually a rabbinic term to describe the sacredness of the books or the inspiration of it. And I think one of the things that Betson, this Danish scholar by the name of Arge Benson, I apologize if I pronounce his first name correctly, but Mr. Benson actually wrote that the debates of the synod mainly centered on the book of Ezekiel, prophet Ezekiel, Proverbs, the Song of Songs, which is the Song of Solomon, Ecclesiastes, and Esther. There also seems to have been some insecurity concerning Chronicles. This seems to indicate that only the law, the Torah, was really acknowledged in Palestinian circles, or at least that prophets and the Ketuvim were considered of secondary importance. So we know that Prophet Ezekiel, Proverbs, Song of Songs, and Ecclesiastes and Esther are in all both Catholic and Protestant Bibles. So if we were to consider this as the settling of the Old Testament canon once and for all, then we have a big problem there, because the Jews were debating between each other on whether does it defile the hands or not. And also that actually shows you that there was no close canon of the Old Testament after Christ, after Jesus ascended to heaven. They were still arguing on whether or not are they inspired, are they sacred, or are they part of the Old Testament canon. And so The question would be, is the session of Jamnia of any relevance to the determination of the Hebrew canon? And the answer would be no. There were no authoritative decisions on the canonicity of the book. And as the Baptist scholar Harold Henry Rowley, he summarizes the whole event. He says, it is indeed doubtful how far it is correct to speak of the Council of Jamnia. We know of discussions that took place there amongst the rabbis, but we know of no formal or binding decisions that were made, and it is probable that the discussions were informal, though nonetheless helping to crystallize and to fix more firmly the Jewish tradition. So basically, it really has very little relevance to the determination of the Hebrew canon, because what took place was a discussion. There was a school that was being set up and a discussion took place. So it's inaccurate to say that there is a council, because there was no council that took place in Jamnia, but rather a discussion that took place in Jamnia. So what is the conclusion then? So the Council of Jamnia is merely a theory. It's merely a hypothesis that is innovated by the German scholar Heinrich Gates, that has no prima facie evidence. And majority of the scholars and the historians have demonstrated that there was no council that took place in Jamnia, but rather a session, a discussion that took place in Jamnia, whether or not these books defile the hands or it does not defile the hands. So they cannot use this as an argument or as an objection against Catholics for using the deuterocanonical books, or even the Orthodox also as well, because the Council of Jamnia is merely a theory, it's merely a hypothesis, and this has been refuted not only by the majority of scholars and historians, but even by other Catholics, and even our Orthodox brothers and sisters have also demonstrated that no council took place in Jamnia, but like what the scholars and the historians, the majority of the scholars and historians says, only a session that took place there. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have enjoyed this video. Click the like and subscribe button, and I hope to see you all again in the next time that I make another video of this. So God bless each and every one of you.